Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I'm going to pry myself away from the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack long enough to respond to some questions. If you'd like to see a question of yours appear in this series, just leave it in the comments section down below. That's where I usually look when gathering questions. And there were quite a lot of good ones last week, so thanks very much for that, guys. We've got a fair few here. I'll try and get through as many as possible. For what it's worth, the footage in the background should have something vaguely interesting. I have, for the first time since Feature Pack 2 released, I guess, before even that, gone back to using immersive combat mode. I wasn't quite sure how it would work with the new changes, with the content direction system and all that kind of stuff, but it seems that as long as you just turn off the new feature, everything works perfectly the same, perfectly normal. I may just start having videos like this. I love how clean the UI gets when you get rid of all this kind of painterly crap that's all around the sides. Oh, it looks so glorious. I'm still a little bit concerned that that level up challenge I was doing a couple of months back on the challenge is dead because they're forcing you to be level 10. Though you can still probably play through the game a lot more immersively using something like this. Anyway, so let's get on to the first question. We'll go with the super common one here first. Aries1, who says, WP, when and if ArenaNet decide to release an expansion to Guild Wars 2, do you think they will be adding more professions to the game? If so, what would you like to see? I do think at least we'll see one more profession. It's kind of a bit of a big joke with ArenaNet where you say, hey, are we going to be getting this or this? And they always say, nothing's off the table, maybe it can happen. And we're left knowing absolutely nothing. But I think especially in terms of adding and releasing new professions, they have left themselves a little bit of space. The discussion you kind of have to have, and that I really like to point out when you go into this idea of adding new professions, what should be in the game, is there are two distinct things you need to recognize a new profession offers, okay? It offers something mechanically that is distinct, i.e. its skills work in a different way, perhaps have different synergies among one another. The class as a whole fills a different niche to other classes that already exist. And secondly, it can have a thematic niche, a style, a flair, a theme about it that again is different to other classes. And I think what most people do when they look at Guild Wars 2 and they say I want more classes is they say stuff like, oh, I really want a ritualist back in the game. And what they're really saying is I want a class that looks and feels like a ritualist. But if you really think about it mechanically, everything almost that the ritualist offered is already there in Guild Wars 2. The idea of bundles, perhaps not bundles that when you drop them do special stuff, but stuff like spirits, stationary things you conjure onto the battlefield that will fight for you, in theory help you control areas. Well, those are turrets, aren't they? Those are engineer turrets. The kind of supportive capabilities of the ritualists you can already see being used. Some named skills, in fact, even are directly being used by the Guardian. Many of their offensive capabilities in the way of spells are just very similar to what you would expect on an elementalist and perhaps air attunement. So mechanically, I would say the ritualist really doesn't have a place in Guild Wars, so you can actually find gameplay that offered in many other places. However, the theme of the class, this thing that communes with the spirits of the dead, that does summon these undead armies which are still distinct to necromancer minions, that has this great affinity with the spirit realm and air magic, and is, you know, this blind light armor class. Nothing like that exists in the game, so that's where its niche is. But I feel like ArenaNet won't ever add a class unless it fulfills both of these criteria. It is both thematically filling a niche and mechanically. And the big problem that they have for most here is mechanically, they already have a lot of their bases covered. Unless, this is an example of me being too close to the game, too short-sighted, and not appreciating the completely wild new mechanics that they could add with new professions. I think the easiest thing to look at for mechanical niches is heavy armors. Obviously, we have 3 light armors, we have 3 medium armors. Why do we only have 2 heavy armors? I believe this is them leaving space. I think mechanically, the biggest niche in Guild Wars 2 is a 3rd heavy armor class. And then when you compare the other heavy armor classes, I would say perhaps it's going to be a 3rd heavy armor class that is attritive in nature, much like the necromancer could potentially be. I don't think you can make a distinction to say, oh, they're going to add a ranged profession, or oh, they're going to add an AoE profession. I think everything's mixed together so much in Guild Wars 2 anyway, in terms of range versus melee and single target versus AoE, that you can't have a whole profession dedicated to something like that. But certainly some kind of attritive heavy armor class, and if you want to follow patterns, medium armor and light armor both have one profession that cannot weapon swap. So maybe this final 3rd heavy armor class will be someone who cannot weapon swap. Thematically, they can go nuts. I mean, there is so much space for all kinds of things. You know, you've got the Dark Knight. Obviously, Archetype seems to fit this very closely. People wanting ritualists, any of the original Guild Wars 1 professions, paragons, dervishes, these are all themes that can still work. The only one that overlaps slightly is Assassin, which is very similar to the Thief, but still could work on its own. The ArenaNet have only really made mistakes thematically for me with the Engineer, and how they tried to combine, like, your mech character, your guy who's really good at building things and tinkering. They combined that with the Alchemist idea, and these could have been totally separate classes that really played into these different themes fully, but instead they mashed them together so that, you know, people coming from other MMOs could say, I always play an Alchemist. Is there an Alchemist in Guild Wars 2? And people can say, the Engineer can throw potions, even though really, let's be honest, he's not much of an Alchemist. Of course, there's still the idea of stuff like unarmored characters, people who fight without any weapons at all, like martial arts kind of fighters that have perhaps different stances and paradigms that they can shift into. There's all kinds of things. Time mages, summoners. I would be happy to see pretty much anything come in as long as it's not another profession that has all these summons. Historically, in the past, when I was a kid especially, I used to love the idea of, in early Guild Wars 1 days, having some kind of summoner class. Something that has all these pets and minions and sort of goes crazy with all this stuff, can summon all these awesome things. I hate the idea now. SPVP in Guild Wars 2 has just destroyed any notion of me liking just fiddling around with AI. It's clunky, it's passive, it never feels fun to die to AI. I hate Rangers running wolves in PvP, which of course everyone does because they're so good because of all the CC, but getting lucky CCs that are completely pivotal for team fights and so forth, I hate it. It's so frustrating. I don't want to see any more ads. And ArenaNet have basically given every single class in this game the ability to summon allies of their own, and it sickens me. But yeah. Okay, so that took quite a while. Let's just whiz through a couple here. Gorkum says, will you do a Dragon Age Inquisition Let's Play? I really like your Let's Plays. It'd be awesome to see you play Inquisition. Unfortunately, no, for several reasons. Mostly because I'm just too busy doing other stuff. I'm having a lot of fun with Grimrock, and you guys have noticed Final Fantasy X-2 we didn't finish yet. So I already feel a bit overwhelmed, you know. I'm like, oh god, I've got to finish these projects. Maybe if it was the perfect world and I finished Grimrock and I finished X2 and then Inquisition came out, I could have considered it. But the truth is, I've not even played Origins or Dragon Age 2, so it's a universe that I'm not really that familiar with. And I'd want to play the first two, definitely, especially if I was going to do videos on it. The third question is kind of a suggestion, I guess, from Jonas5, who says, here's a place to start with voice acting, because we were talking about that last episode. Why don't you read the Guild Wars books? I would definitely listen to that. This comes up an awful lot, and my response is always, this would be amazing, I would love to do it, especially for just my mastery of the human language, of learning actually correctly pronounce half the words I read, but never dare to say out loud for myself, just to force myself through that kind of experience and come out on the other end a much more intelligent guy. I would love to read these books, and not even the fact that they are Guild Wars books, and I am so close to this franchise. However, I do think there's a bit of a legal thing with it. I do remember there was a lady doing it on YouTube a while ago, a long while ago in fact, and she got all of her stuff pulled. I don't think it was necessarily ArenaNet sitting around and saying, oh, they're doing this is copyright, blah blah blah. I think it was probably on the part of NCSoft or something like that, but she was basically asked, can you please take these down? And just hearing like a story like that, I really don't want to get into it. It's a big undertaking, something I would have loved to have done, but it's probably not going to happen. The next one's from Macy J. Rider6, who says, hey WP, is GW1 worth playing now? And also, how hard would it be now to get stuff needed for the Hall of Monuments, including the God Walking Amongst Mere Mortals title? Now, even though I have this, even though this is something I did years and years and years ago, I'm actually probably one of the worst people in the world to ask this question. I've barely played Guild Wars 1 this entire year. The only time since Guild Wars 2 really that I've ever set back into Guild Wars 1 is to record footage on rare occasions where I want footage from Guild Wars 1 that I don't already have in my Let's Plays. You might notice I reuse a lot of footage from those old LPs just because I have the entire game documented on the channel. The entire game, except, you know, these very rare, weird little things. And it's so infrequent for me to mention those things during Guild Wars 2 videos. So that's the only time I play Guild Wars 1 now. I have no idea what it's like. I have heard from people within the community that there is still a pretty active player base. I am following the Guild Wars 1 subreddit also, and I would recommend you guys do that too, because there is a bit of a community there. I feel like it's probably a better place to go than some of the forums around there at the moment. And there's even like a website initiative where all the really active guilds and stuff are like all signed up apparently, and they all sort of know about each other, and so it's very easy to find people and know exactly what's going on and keep in tabs with that community. But even if I was totally understanding of the place that Guild Wars 1's, you know, user base and economy are at, I still couldn't give you much good advice on how long it would take to get you 50 points for your Hall of Monuments. For those who might be lost, this is the idea of getting a load of stuff done in Guild Wars 1, and you can connect it to your Guild Wars 2 account, and you get a ton of achievement points, unique skins, and titles in the second game. But here's the problem. When they announced the calculator, and, you know, had this idea that you've got 50 points, the day that that came out, I already, as a Guild Wars 1 player, this was like a year before Guild Wars 2 even launched, I already had 49 out of 50 points done. I logged in, I dedicated one weapon into my Hall of Monuments, and I was at 50 out of 50. And that was it, that was me done, you know. I didn't ever have an experience of actually grinding for Hall of Monuments points, because I'd already played the game so extensively before they even released what, like, the rewards incentive was going to be. So I have no idea, I really don't. I have no idea how difficult it would be. A small part of me, and maybe this is wrong, kind of thinks that because largely many players aren't playing it anymore, it would be easy to convince guys over there with loads of wealth to say, hey, can you give me some stuff so I can get to 50 out of 50? I mean, I feel like at this point in the game's life, those really active players are going to be quite selfless, surely? Or maybe I'm wrong about that. But yeah, my perception is very warped, I'm afraid, and I can tell you. Louis Sanchez 1. There were so many voice acting questions. Said, hey WP, are you going to voice a Sylvari? I totally would if I was asked, but I doubt I'll ever be asked. It's a bit of a shame because Sylvari, they're not on the top of my list for like favourite races, not by a long way, but those are the generic British guys in Guild Wars 2, and so I guess if I was ever going to voice something for this franchise, it would be that. As I say though, I'm not actually very confident in my skill at voice acting. I mean, if you're saying, could you just read lines into a mic without changing your voice at all? Hell yeah, I would do that. Newgwets 1 says, during the Ghostwrite quest for the Dermot Priory, Gix says, so Gix is the head of the Dermot Priory, that Ritlock owed him a favour. Could it maybe be that Gix helped him to get Sahothin? Aha! Cool little theory. I mean, we don't have anything more to go on than this, but I think if anyone in the franchise had some claim, some, you know, ability to help Ritlock get this weapon, maybe Gix could be it. So for those out of the loop, Sahothin was a sword wielded by the Prince in Guild Wars 1. Now, the Prince ultimately died, and he and his swords, well, his body and the sword were left miles and miles and miles away on the Ring of Fire. That's that fiery island chain that we can't play in Guild Wars 2, but you see in the bottom left of the world map. So it was there, and then a volcano erupted, presumably, you know, destroying his body and surrounding it by lava and stuff, and the sword too, presumably. But then Guild Wars 2 launched, and it was suddenly like, oh, Ritlock's got the sword. And it wasn't like some kind of plot hole or thing that the devs hadn't considered. It was really set up as this big mystery, how did he get the sword? And even as soon as some of the most recent Living World Season 2 updates, they've been sort of talking about this. How did you get the sword, Ritlock? And he won't tell us. So the question is how, and I think, yeah, Gix, you know, Dermot Priory, magical artifacts, all this kind of, yeah, there could be some line of thinking there. Maybe this is the favour. Why did Ritlock want it at all, though, in the first place? We don't know. I kind of like the most recent patch, because we're getting so much more story on Kaith, kind of explodes open what we think we know about the members of Destiny's Edge, right? And the same can go for Ritlock too. There are these complete chapters of his life, huge things about him that we don't know. And you really stop to think about that fact, and then you realise, oh yeah, there's this Sahothin thing. I don't know whether I ever mentioned on the channel as well, but one theory I love about Ritlock being in the Mists is that ultimately he's going to meet Rurik there. Now, everyone's talking about him meeting the gods in the Mists at the moment because of that Twitter screenshot they gave out. But what if he meets the prince himself? And the prince says, what the hell have you been doing with my sword, kind of thing. That would be very interesting. I'm very curious about that thread. Anyway, so moving on. Vader871 says, hey WP, I was just looking at the glory of Tyria from Camp Resolve. Immediately I thought, I bet you can't see it from Brisbane Wildlands. So I went to check it out. It made me really sad that in fact you can't see it from the other map, even though I was standing right in the middle of Fort Vandal and the glory of Tyria was nowhere to be seen. Do you think large instant zones breaks immersion and cohesiveness of the world? Has it impacted your enjoyment of the game? When I was a lot younger, absolutely, this really impacted my enjoyment. So if people don't know what we're talking about here, when you go to the new map, the Silver Waste, you've got the portal behind you, and flying above the portal, seemingly back the way you came, you see this huge airship, the Glory of Tyria. And so the idea would be, can I go back through this portal and then look in the sky and you'll see it up there? So, you know, you get this kind of continuity and you feel like everything genuinely is connected, which of course mechanically, game engine-wise, it is not. And the devs could have taken the time to put this little detail in there, and it would have felt pretty cool. But they didn't, and they often don't do stuff like this. The actual map boundaries through the portals rarely have very much continuity at all. You can painfully clearly see that they were worked on by different people, perhaps at different periods of time, with very little thought about where the two maps connect together beyond just rough stuff like, oh, this is a mountainy area, or this is some kind of a field. It does suck, you know, and I would say definitely when I was younger, this kind of thing really annoyed me. One thing I was always really jealous of World of Warcraft for and loved about Perfect World while I was playing it was the seamless open worlds, you know, and this was something I loved about the Elder Scrolls too. And Guild Wars always struggled, Guild Wars 1. I remember this was a big thing in the community before launch as well, because people heard that Guild Wars 2 was now going to be a fully persistent MMO as opposed to an instanced game, which the first one primarily was. And because they heard that Guild Wars 2 was going to be fully persistent, i.e. you can meet players anywhere you want in the whole world, many people incorrectly assumed that also meant it was going to be open world and there weren't going to be any boundaries between maps. And we as a community, those in the know, would constantly be telling people, look, don't expect this, there are still maps, but it can be fully persistent with maps, it's just they're huge kind of maps like this. And, you know, it is a disappointment. Now I don't really think about it anymore. The most I think about is how the maps are all these stupid, perfectly shaped rectangles, and that breaks my immersion a bit too. That's the main thing I notice. This could, again, be another example of me just getting a bit too close to the game. I'm a big believer that players can get way too close to something if they spend too long doing it and forget what genuinely would make the experience better. And I think it's probably true that an open world would make Guild Wars 2 much better. I just don't really care about that fact anymore. And to be fair as well, sometimes this idea of the portals and the maps being separate can kind of heighten immersion. And let me explain this. When you are in the Silver Waste and you look back through the portal, you don't see Fort Vandal. You see some sort of craggy looking canyon places that presumably your character walked through. So it's this subtle idea that when you walk through one of these portals, there's like some distance, perhaps a great distance, perhaps a short distance, but a distance that your toon has actually walked. And this can make the game world feel bigger than it actually is in game, if that makes sense. Like, you know, you travel from Queensdale to Kessex Hills, you know, there's a part of you that can say, oh yes, by walking through this portal while I was in this loading screen, my character travelled for a week on the road across, you know, the farmlands of Kryta, and now here I am in Kessex. Something like that. I've played a lot of RPGs that do kind of a similar thing, and I don't know, there's a hint of that in Guild Wars 2, but it's not ideal, and it kind of sucks. Alright, I'm going to go through these last ones really quickly. Charlie Malatic says, Mass Effect background music? Have you changed your stance on replaying the Mass Effect series? I know for a while you didn't want to play it because it was too fresh in your mind. No, that's true. I actually don't think it's too fresh in my mind anymore. It's just I don't want to jump into another massive franchise and lose like 3 weeks of my life. And you guys are like, where have all the videos gone in? It's because I have no self-control and I've just been playing Mass Effect the entire time. No, the music you hear in these videos is honestly me taking credit for someone else's work. I went on YouTube, there's this thing called the Relaxing Music Compilation. It's like 4 hours long. I downloaded the whole thing and I just play different chunks of it for you guys in these videos. A lot of the music here can be from games I've never even played. They're just nice music and I get so many compliments on it. I can't help but feel a little bit bad. I didn't actually handpick a lot of these tracks. So the next question is from FC Arsenal 1, who says, Yo WP, so since I started to play Guild Wars 1 again, I've been watching some Nightfall gameplay videos of you, and your voice is very different. Like, it totally makes me think of another person when hearing it. When you listen to now and back then, which voice resembles your voice more? I don't know. I mean, we all have weird perceptions of our own voice, right? It is odd. I do think I've lost a little bit of my British accent, I guess, a little bit, and I have no idea why that would have happened, but I do feel like there's a little bit less of a twang in my voice than there used to be. I'm a lot higher pitched now, but maybe that's just me being more openly enthusiastic. I really don't know. I honestly think I prefer the old voice, though. There's also to consider the fact that when I started playing, or maybe it was halfway through Nightfall, I actually started using the mic I'm currently using now. Like, I swapped mics. And so at that point, my voice probably will have changed. I would actually love to, at some point in the future, get a proper DAC and microphone and stuff and kind of get a bit more bass in there and cool things. A bit like what Matt does over on his channel since he changed out his audio setup. I do quite like it. But again, it's just a money thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that if anyone were to meet me IRL, having only ever listened to the videos, they'd be like, whoa, you sound completely different. Higher, lower, I don't know. And so that was the last question for today. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. I'll be back tomorrow for some more Guild Wars stuff. I may do an update on the level up challenge thing if it works, but I just think it might be a bit dead. We'll see anyway. Thanks very much, guys. Leave questions down below. We do a lot more discussion as well on this subreddit that I mentioned a couple of videos ago. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. I'll be posting fan art and stuff there, which should be quite cool. And so yeah. Anyway, cheers, guys. Have a great evening. I'll see you next time.